Uh, Basically, my kind of overarching involvement is to, and I've said this before, is the academics is the means, not the ends. So through academics, we are looking for deeper spiritual and emotional methods to help them become more defined and wholesome human beings. So at the end of the day, it's not about who's more advanced academically, because that's just one indicator of the multitude of what makes a human being, right? But we use those academics to see where they're struggling in terms of self-confidence, self-inner talk, right? The quality of their work, taking pride in their work, taking something to completion, learning a new skill. So these academics are just a means to an ultimate end in creating the best versions of themselves that we can. And even though they're young, we believe that there's no such thing. You always want to plant the seed, because they may not really get it now, but you've planted the seed, it's there. So ultimately one day it will click. And the earlier you plant the seed, the hope is that it clicks sooner rather than later. So as opposed to someone coming to that awareness of the self in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, they might come to the awareness of self much, much earlier, because we've implemented those questions internally within them. And what Alicia was saying is we're talking about the law of causality, right? And that's a huge philosophical principle of moral virtue, is the law of cause and effect. And with public school, I mean, it's kind of in the title, isn't it? Public school is the external public. And so everything is based on the effects of the world. But you cannot change the effect that's already happened, right? Homeschooling is focusing on the home, the internal world. And that's the cause, right? And the causality, the why, the origin is the only place you really can affect that change. And so bringing it back home to the self, it's really in the title of homeschool versus public, which is the external persona. We want to bring everything back to the self, is that you are the one responsible for your body, for your thoughts, for your attitudes. What you create is a choice, right? Success is a choice. Failure is a choice. And that's the real schooling that we want to bring back into the world of learning. So that's kind of what I would say our mission here is collectively. And we're all supportive, and we all contribute observations and things that we recognize and are concerned about.
Is there anything else that you guys are intentionally applying because growing up it wasn't there for you, or the schooling disappointed you in a way, in a sense, and you're really aware of this and you want to make sure that something stands out?
Well, I was telling Jay earlier is the knowing the difference between sharing and taking. I mean, sharing is built on mutual consent, right? But in today's world, if a mom's kid is at the playground playing with a toy and another kid comes over, immediately the reaction these days is share, share, share. You should share. Don't be selfish, you know. But if the other child is not willing, then it's not sharing, it's taking. So you've taught one child that he has no real rights to own or have anything, so there's no point, right? And then you're teaching the other kid that he's just entitled to take whatever he likes. But that's not sharing. Sharing is mutual consent, right? And that's the mix-up of today's world, is we want to make sure that if a kid's playing with a toy that they had first, even if the other kid wants to play with it, the other kid has the right to say, I want to play and share, or I don't want to. And it's not to shame them to sharing, because there are things that are more enjoyable doing by yourself, right? Because you're doing a thought experiment, you're doing a play experiment for yourself, and you're in flow. So we give that child the right to say, no, I don't want to share right now. So then we tell the other kid, so-and-so doesn't want to share right now. They're in the flow of playing, and you need to understand that. And how would you feel if you're in the middle of playing with a toy that you're really enjoying, and then someone comes and is forcing you to give up that toy? So we have to make sure that we understand even the little subtle differences between sharing and taking. because that can create long-term damage. That's the reason why procrastination is through the roof with adults today, because that was kind of the philosophy that a lot of parents took, especially when they had a bunch of children, and they would make the older children, no, you have to share, you have to give this to your younger sibling, you have to give this to your little sister, you have to give it to your younger brother. And so what does that do to a person growing up? Then they don't dare to dream big, they don't dare to own anything. What would be the point, right? Because it just would be taken away from you, and you don't know when that belief system was created within you. But it starts when you're little, right? So those are the way that we collectively perceive those kinds of situations, to teach different, and to make sure that they understand from when they're little that what these words actually mean.
I'm sure you go over game theory.
Yeah, we use board games. Again, it's a means to an end, right? It's ultimately not about the board game. It's using the board game for them to understand how to be graceful winners and graceful losers.
And finding another way.
Right, finding another way to win. Winning as a team, winning collectively, right? When you lose, say, good game. Right? And that's really difficult, even for a child, right? For a child, they lose, it's like the end of the world, right? Mm-hmm. And you see adults that are like that too. So we want to cultivate that good sportsmanship, playing for the fun of the game, rather than playing to always win or playing not to lose. And those are three different mental paradigms. And so all it takes to accomplish the schooling that you want is a conscious shift and a knowing of yourself. I would tell any parent to go deep within themselves and ask themselves, what do they wish they would have learned? How do they wish they would have learned these things? And experiment, try. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because if you're afraid to make mistakes, you're teaching your kids not to make mistakes, and then you start the cycle all over again, right? If it doesn't work, try something else, try something new. We're trying something new all the time, because you don't want to be rigid and then only having one singular way of doing something. So you want to experiment and then find what works for you, find the flow. There's this secret sauce, really, to getting your kids to learn anything. And I'll tell you what the secret sauce is. Repetition. That's the secret sauce. The 15 spice, be willing to repeat yourself.
1,000 times.
1,000 times, right? That's the secret sauce to teaching anything to anyone, is be willing and patient to repeat yourself over and over. If your kid doesn't understand A, B, C, D on day 1, repeat it day 7. Repeat it day 15, day 30. You repeat it until they get it. And you have to be willing to repeat it depending on the pace that their kid is with. And find different ways. Find another way, right? Be creative. That's really just the secret sauce, is what are the different ways I can teach the alphabet? And how many times am I willing to repeat myself until it clicks, until they get it? And then you move on to something else, right? That's it. That's all it takes.
Yoga and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
doing some meditation yoga.
Meditation. Yeah. We throw in that.
Handling with the anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Emotion regulation, things like that. I think the biggest mistake that when people get overwhelmed with the idea of homeschooling is they wonder, how am I going to fill the entire day with academics? You don't. Maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes is academics. The rest of the day is plenty of other things to learn. How do I control anger? How do I practice patience? How do I use imagination? How do I clean up my toys? How do I use my manners? How do I play carefully? How do I share? That's valuable schooling. That's learning. So I think once you put equal, if not more, value on that method of teaching, then you'll see the day goes by really fast. Like, we focus on academics probably for like 60 minutes. After that, it's how do you play? How do you share? How do you put on a puppet show? Right? How do you eat properly? How do you sit? How do you? And it fills up the rest of the day.
And it may not be 60 minutes straight.
Yeah.
You take breaks. If they're not able to focus, here's a trampoline break. Let's go
Yes.
jump on the trampoline for 10 minutes. You
Yes.
Burn off
Yes.
energy.
Or let's go swim. It looks
Some
like you
gardening.
need
Right.
some time outside.
Right.
And that's something that the public school doesn't offer.
Right.
It doesn't.
And a lesson for the day can be how to wash our hands properly. That's a lesson for the week. right? It's as simple as that. So don't get overwhelmed in the thought of I'm trying to do all these worksheets and the kid's not seeing through it. Okay, well, throw away the worksheets. They're not working. Or only do one worksheet at a time and then take a break. Find another way to teach, right? Just like we mentioned earlier, we had the kids fold hand towels yesterday. They are learning. They're learning the joy of chores, of responsibility, of folding things, of common sense, right? How do I fold this? How do I keep the lines straight?
And
That's
helping one
learning.
another. They were learning how to help each other.
Yeah, and it's hands-on. You can't learn that in a textbook, right? The textbook, you have to understand, is very limited, right? Outside of textbook, there's much more limitless things you can teach. Even how to look at a flower, how to notice a flower, how to play with a ladybug, how many legs does it have? Did you ever notice? Did you count? Do you know what is an insect, what's not an insect? Right? That's schooling. And what you can teach is infinite. Like we had one week where it was all about bumblebees and ladybugs, and another week was about lizards and snakes and birds. That's a whole plants, infinite things that you can teach. Why is the sky blue? That's a whole week of lessons, right? So remember, we take for granted the infinite knowledge around us that we forget has to be learned. Like, how does a tree come to existence? We take for granted that knowledge. So the kids just know that there's a tree, but they have no idea where a tree comes from. There's a lesson, there's a week. It comes from a seed, and from a seed it grows into what? So look at the world around you, and look at it through the eyes of a child with curiosity, right? And the hunger to want to know the causation. What caused this to be what it is today? And you never really know a thing unless you know its causality, right? You never know a tree unless you know where it came from. And so if you go into schooling with that approach, what you have to teach is infinite. There's infinite things you can teach. I would say, before you teach, study. Before you teach, learn. Before you become a teacher, be a great student first. So before you take on the responsibility of teaching a child, study them first. Study your child. Do you know your child? Do you know what makes them tick? Do you know what motivates them, what demotivates them? I would say study your child first, and then really meditate on that, and then slowly come to a game plan, and be open to changing that game plan as things evolve, right? But study before you teach. Read up on things. Get materials and resources. Do a lot of introspection, right? You don't need a big budget. If you have a pen and pencil or and paper, you're fine. You can write out the lesson plan, right? There are free things you can get online. You can look up things, images, and get inspired that way. But go in, to be a good teacher, go in with the hunger to learn about that child and how to best serve that child. And as long as that's your overall goal, you should be fine.